Hello there. Today I thought I would bring you something a little bit different. Those of you who have been here for a while will already know that I work freelance, and those of you who haven't been here for a while, I will link down below. I have done a video that was the day in the life of a freelancer, if that interests you. I can't say a great deal about my job other than to say that I freelance sort of in connection with another company. So they source the jobs for me. I'm very, very lucky for. They then send me those jobs each day and I have to complete them on a freelance basis each day. So I am freelance, but I kind of have that crutch of another company supporting me at the same time. I adore my job, I really do. I think it's the best job that there ever could be. The only way it could be better is if I was writing my own stuff, but hopefully in the future that's what's going to happen. But at the moment this suits me very well because I can focus and manage my own time, and I'm quite a good person at managing time. So I get up at the same time each morning, generally about 7 to half 7, and work really hard to get my work jobs done so that I can then focus at least an hour each day on my personal writing, which, you know, it suits me perfectly, rather than having to be at a place at a certain time and do overtime and then not have time to do my writing. But I wanted to talk to you today about some of the downsides that I found through being a freelancer. Please don't think this is a moany video at all. I am aware that I'm in a very privileged position and I wouldn't change being freelance for the world. However, especially recently, my mental health's not been that great, and I think freelance work does do a lot of damage to your mental health if you aren't careful. And there is obviously information out there about how to make friends when you're freelance, how to stop yourself feeling lonely, but there's not specific information is what I have found. So it would have been really useful for me if there was a little bit more out there about this topic. So I thought I would just do a quick rundown of the 5 unexpected things that I have found from being freelance. Or maybe a lot of them aren't necessarily unexpected, but they have affected me a lot more than I thought they would have. So without further ado, the first point I wanted to discuss is loneliness. Now, loneliness, you might think, is a logical part of being freelance, and to be honest, it's part of the appeal for me. I'm a very introverted person. I like my own company. I'm very happy on my own, and I certainly think loneliness affects me less than it would a lot of other people. You know, I can go for a day without talking to anybody, just doing my work, and I don't feel like I haven't spoken to anybody. I think as well, part of this for me is that with the company that I work with, because I'm not having to source jobs, I'm not having to talk on the phone to clients, I do have a go-to person who I can talk to, but that's all done on Google Chats. So I don't have that breakup of the day of speaking to people on the phone and things, which I think a lot of freelancers do have. And as I say, the loneliness doesn't always hit me that hard, but recently especially, I have been very, very lonely. I think even when you're an introvert, you do need some level of social interaction. And obviously I have my partner home in the evenings, but I find that loneliness can still really creep in, and it can really damage your mental health over time. And it starts sort of making you question everything and sort of doubt yourself. And I think there's a thing as well, that when you're freelance, you don't necessarily have the chance to meet new friends. Obviously a lot of freelancers go out to events and things like that, and hopefully in the future that is what I will be doing, but at this stage in my life I don't have the chance to go out and meet new people. And you know, in my working life I don't have the chance to meet new friends, and I think when you're working, that kind of gives you the forward momentum of, you know, new people start all the time and you're always interacting with new customers, and yeah, not meeting new people for a long period of time can be really quite devastating in a way. But all is not lost, because there are ways I have found to help myself. So one of the major ways is to get out each day. Obviously when you go for a walk or whatever, you don't necessarily interact with other people, but just being around other people and seeing other people around you, you're opening up your world, if you know what I mean. You're opening up your experiences, you're opening up the chance to have a quick conversation with somebody asking for directions, or just say hello to somebody that you pass. I also find if I'm really low, going for a cup of tea or something when I finish, or even just going to a shop and buying something at a physical till can help. It's just small low-level interactions that they make a huge difference to how you feel overall. I also find it's very important to set up dates with your friends and set up things to look forward to with other people. Personally, for me, I've never been that great at keeping on top of friendships. It's just a thing. I'm as I say, I'm very introverted, and when I was working full-time in a very people orientated situation where I would literally meet hundreds of people each day, I just didn't have it in me anymore to meet my friends when I finished work, for instance. So if there was ever anything on, I would cry it off. But since being freelance, I've noticed that it really is important to set dates with friends and keep them, and that will keep you afloat. If you even just meeting up with your friends once a month or every 2 weeks, it makes a huge difference. Moving on to point 2, and that is instability. Now, instability, I think this is more something that I didn't expect. Although, I don't know, because when you go freelance, you do obviously let go of the security of having a boss. But it's something that bothers me a lot more than I would have thought it does, especially given that, you know, I work in conjunction with another company. I don't have to worry about not getting the same amount of jobs each day. You know, the agreement between us is that they give me that set amount, so I know that I've at least got that much money to work with. But it still is surprisingly worrying how unstable it can feel at times. Certainly when I started this job, and it kind of, I suppose because I kind of fell into it, I was just constantly waiting for it to evaporate, for the jobs to just dry up and not be there anymore, and me had to actually get a job. And I think it's a strange thing, because where I was working before, there's been a lot of development in recent years in terms of computers doing the jobs of people, which I think is probably the case for most industries. And obviously a computer can't do the job that I do now. So in that sense, it's probably a more stable and sustainable job than the job that I was in before. And I never previously would have thought, oh, I could lose my job at any minute. So it is strange how I feel that now. I think a lot of it as well is to do with in traditional employment. You have things like unions, you have bosses, you have, you know, notices and legal procedures that people have to go through, whereas when you're freelance, you don't have that security net. You know, if a client doesn't want to work with you, then they can just stop working with you with no notice and not pay you, and that's that. Obviously with my company it's a little bit different. They don't have any contractual obligation to keep me on, but there is kind of a slight contract between us in that if they can ever not give me jobs, they will give me 2 weeks notice, and equally I have to give them 2 weeks notice if I want time off, which completely suits me because I think you can't have it one way and not the other, so I'm quite happy with that. But yeah, so instability is a big issue, and it can really shake your confidence a lot of the time, especially if you're worrying about it a lot. It causes a lot of stress, but I have realised that the way around this is to save money. Saving money is really important anyway, but if you're a freelancer, I think it becomes even more important, because ultimately you need some kind of safety net in place, and if work does dry up, you need to know that you can sustain yourself for quite a long period without it. I think that's the difference. You know, when you're in employment, you might save just in case of emergency or in case you need to buy something big. In self-employment, I think you more save in case you don't get any jobs for a sustainable period of time. I would preferably like to have always at least enough money for 6 months in the bank. That was how much I sort of set myself when I left my traditional job, and that's how much I feel comfortable with, because then there's no massive panic if you suddenly don't get jobs for a while. You know that you've got that money there, and if you did need to search for other work or a traditional job, then you could do it on that funding. So saving is the lifesaver when it comes to the worry of instability, and also just letting go of the fear, I think. And the longer you do it and the longer the work comes in, the more stable you start to feel. Then I've got misunderstandings. So this one was a real shock to me, because it's not something that you would ever have to experience in a traditional job. You know, when you're in a traditional workplace and somebody asks you to do something on a certain day, like a friend or a family member, and you say, sorry, I can't do that, I'm working, there's no question, you know, it's, oh, okay, yep, that's fine, you're in that place, I know you're in that place, you've got a boss to stop you from leaving that place, and you need a job. Whereas when you're freelance, people just don't have that understanding. I've actually lost friendships through the fact that people will ring me up, and they'll ring me up at like 12, 1 o'clock, and they'll say, fancy a cup of tea? And I'll say, I can't, I'm working. And then I hear secondhand that they couldn't believe that I wouldn't leave the house and go and have a cup of tea with them because I work from home. And family members as well, I get this all the time, misunderstandings. And it is misunderstandings, where a family member will go, oh, well, you can come to that because you work from home, so you can do that. Or a big one is, well, why don't you do your work the night before so that you can do this thing tomorrow? Now, I will state, yes, my time is in my control. I can, if I want to, do my jobs the night before. But what I think people don't understand is that my jobs take me at least 8 hours each day, if not more. Sometimes if it's a hard client or I've got a lot of posts for the day, I will be working for 9 hours or so. And that's before I even do my personal writing, which I do count as working time because I think it's important. So I do count that extra hour on the end of my day. So generally I do work around 9-hour days on a standard day with my personal writing included. If I were to then add another 8 hours onto my day, that would be an insanely long and difficult day, and why would I want to do that? Admittedly, sometimes I will do like half my work the night before if I have to, and then I will do half of it in the morning, so I have a half day if somebody really wants me to do something or there's a commitment that I want to keep. But generally, I don't really have the time to do my jobs the night before, especially with my booktube as well. I read during the evenings, that is my reading time, and that is kind of in a roundabout way part of something that I have to do as well, really. So yeah, misunderstandings are a big issue, and people get really quite angry if I say don't answer my phone to them during the day, or if I simply say no, I can't meet you today. And it really makes my blood boil because why don't people understand that I work? I think as well, because I have to give 2 weeks notice of if I'm taking any days off. So in this sense, it's a little bit unique. You know, most freelancers completely focus and manage their own time. I do have that commitment that I have to give 2 weeks off, but the amount of times it'll be about 3 days to an event and a family member will say, oh, we're doing this, do you want to come? You know, you can just take the time off, you're freelance. And it's like, you know that I can't do that. So yeah, it's a real problem. I think as well, people expect me, and this is probably something personal to me, but people expect that I can just take an hour off for lunch and go and meet them or something. For one, I only take 20 minutes for lunch because if I didn't, I wouldn't be able to finish in time to do my personal writing. For two, I find that if I go out of the house and do something, and it's not always the case, and I am getting better, but if I go out of the house and do something or meet somebody, I completely get out of the zone of my writing and my work. Because I have to use a lot of concentration and I have to come up with a lot of ideas in very quick succession. And as soon as I break that trail of thought and that, you know, motion, it's very difficult for me to get back into it. And so when I come home, it's likely that my afternoon will take me double the time because I am kind of in another place, if you know what I mean. So I don't like to split up my work days at all. I like to just get them finished. If I have to, I have to. There have been times recently where I've had to be out of the house and I have managed it, but it's very difficult and I don't like doing it. But yeah, people completely misunderstand, and to be honest, I don't have any real answer to this other than to say that you need to respect your own work time. So yes, people are going to get angry and people are going to not understand why you can't meet up with them or why you can't answer your phone, but you need to be strict with that, because as soon as you start blurring those boundaries, your work is going to suffer, and if your work suffers, you don't have freelance jobs anymore. So one of the best ways I can probably suggest, and I don't do it myself because I listen to audiobooks on my phone, and also because it doesn't ring that much, but if you're a person who has quite an active social life and people ring you quite a lot, I would advise not putting your phone in your office with you and making sure that friends know that. They're going to get annoyed, they're going to not understand why you do it, but doing it in itself means that they know no point calling you during the middle of the day because you're not going to answer, and that will make all the difference. And as I say, just stick to your guns. Stick to your guns, treat this as work time, don't treat it as time where you can just drop everything and go off because somebody asks you to. Then I've got the inability to switch off. Now this, again, is no surprise really. A lot of freelancers say about this, but I think it's a big thing and it's a big problem, and certainly my anxiety and my stress levels have gotten a lot higher since being freelance because there's no real cut-off point. When you're working a traditional job, you know that at the end of the day you come home and that's your cut-off point, and even if you think about work during your evening, it's still a separate place, you know, for the most part. Some people obviously carry on working when they get home and take calls and stuff when they get home, but a lot of the time when you get home, that's your cut-off point, that's your safe place. You don't have to think about work again if you don't want to until the next day. And that is true with freelance, but I think it's much harder to get that separation. Because you're working in the place that you're living, it kind of all merges into one, and it's much easier to carry on working or to not give yourself that cut-off where you finally relax, so you're constantly feeling on edge. I certainly find, as I say, my anxiety has skyrocketed since becoming freelance. But there are a few ways around this as well. One thing I find really helps is not working in the place where I relax in the evenings. So I go up to my office and I will work there. Admittedly, sometimes I find it useful to split that up and work in other places around the house for a morning or an afternoon, but that's a different issue. For the most part, I will work in my office. I will come downstairs and sit in my living room for my lunch, and then I will go back up and work in my office until I'm finished. And even though you're not physically moving from the house, just the process of going from your study and going downstairs is kind of like coming home in a way. So that can help, really, separating your working area from your living area. I think if I worked full-time in my living room, it would be even harder to find that cut-off point. And I also think it would be hard to concentrate on the work I was doing, because as much as it's hard to relax, it would also be hard to kickstart yourself into work. So I think a separate office is pretty essential. Also, I find that I have to go out for even just a quick walk around the block or something. In between, I tend to do this between the things I write for work and the things I write for my personal writing, because it kind of gives a cut-off point to the two, and it helps me transition. And then after I finish my personal writing, I will have dinner, and that's kind of the cut-off point for the evening. So you have to have cut-off points in a way. Even something as simple, I know some freelancers have a shower or do some exercise or something like that. Just anything to kind of let your brain know that this is the end of the working day and now it's the evening, can really help. It still can be difficult at times, I'm not going to lie and say it's not, but it kind of helps. And also be strict with yourself about your finishing times. You know, you wouldn't just carry on working for 2 hours or 3 hours past your end of your shift at a workplace. So don't do that when you're freelance. Be very strict about finishing, and finishing at a decent time as well. Don't carry on working until 8, 9 o'clock. Finish at 5 or 6, and try and give yourself an afternoon, evening as much as you can. And then the last point I wanted to talk to you about was self-doubt. Now, I think this is kind of part of any creative process, is that you doubt yourself. You don't know whether what you're doing is good. And I think when you're in a workplace, you have that constant reassurance of other people around you. So even if they're not specifically praising what you're doing, you can rest easy that if what you were doing wasn't right, they would be telling you about it there and then, you know. This may again be quite unique to my situation, because I think normally when you're a freelancer you would get regular feedback from clients. For me, the feedback goes to the company that I work with. So unless there's a change which needs to happen, which does happen sometimes, I don't hear any feedback really. So it's probably different in that sense, but I think generally freelancing does bring a lot of self-doubt, and I think because you rely so heavily on your good ideas and your creativity, you start to doubt whether what you're doing is actually worth paying for, and I think that's kind of a normal thing. And also, I get really anxious sometimes if I'm not 100% happy with something that I've done. I get really anxious that the client's not going to be happy and that I'm going to have to rewrite the whole thing, and it's a real problem, and it's not something that happens often at all. I have to say I probably get about one rewrite every 4 months or so, so it's not bad at all. But I think it's an inevitable part of being a freelancer, and relying on your own brain to bring in an income rather than relying on a manager who will tell you the jobs you have to do. I don't know, again, the way around it. I think just believing in yourself and just reminding yourself that you are doing right and that you're doing good things. And also I find getting inspiration from other places and getting myself excited about different topics can help as well, and it gives me ideas, and that keeps me feeling confident in what I'm doing. So just keep trying to be creative, keep trying to be original, believe in what you're doing, and just trust in what you're creating basically. It's easier said than done, but I think it's just a constant battle that you have to fight when you're freelance. So those are my 5 pointers of the freelance life. Please let me know down below if you're freelance, if there's anything else negative about the lifestyle that you've noticed. As I say, this is in no means a moany video. I wouldn't change my job for the world, but I do think it's helpful to talk about these things so that we can help each other through them. So I will see you next time. Bye.